Good evening. Welcome to Cornerstone Home Inspector Education Center. Tonight we have Mark Austin from Stow Corp, who is going to be presenting to us exterior finish insulation systems. Um, just a little information for you during the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in your chat bot. If you do want to break in, you can unmute yourself, but please make sure that your microphone's muted during the webinar. This makes it just pleasant for everybody. And then just to let you know, we have our next webinar coming up is on electrical panels. That's November 18th. For anybody registered or licensed in Connecticut, we have our law seminar, our webinar that's going to be January 5th and 6th. So if you missed our Mohegan Sun event, you can now do it online with us live. And I will do my best to get our certificates out for tonight. Tomorrow, you'll get them by the end of the day. And if for some reason you are not receiving your certificates, just email me and I'll get them right out to you. And I'll turn it over to Mark.
Hey, thank you, Jim.
No problem.
Welcome. My name is Mark Austin with Stow Corp, and I am here tonight to talk to you about Eifs, which is also known as exterior insulation and finish systems. If you talk to contractors in the industry, all the contractors call it Eifs, which is perfectly acceptable. All the manufacturers call it Eifs. And it is a non-load-bearing, insulating, decorative, and protective finish system for exterior walls. I'm sure as you've gone around, Eifs is not huge in New England like it is maybe in a lot of other areas of the country, but in your inspection travels, I'm sure you've seen plenty of Eifs systems. And so tonight we're just going to kind of go through Eifs and what it's all about. And hopefully I can help you, get you up to speed on where we are. So the first thing people say to me with Eifs, and if you've ever worked with realtors, they're going to say, oh my gosh, Eifs, that's not good stuff. There's been problems. Well, when the industry first came out, there were a lot of problems. So there's been 3 generations of Eifs. We're on our 3rd generation. The first generation of Eifs had a lot of problems. So the first generation of Eifs, you were allowed by code to adhesively attach that. I'm going to try to stay on residential during this program. So they were gluing these systems to OSB or plywood sheathing for a wood framed house with no drainage plane, no weather barrier. So if water got in, it had no means to get out. So at that point, you're just relying on proper flashing and sealants, which was not being done in the industry in the infancy of the industry. So as you can see from this, there was a class action lawsuit, and there are a lot of claims, and we've worked through that. So the first generation was kind of in the 80s when things got installed, and then the second generation was in the 90s when the claims got taken care of. The code changed to a Tyvek or a paper goods. So you can go to the next slide, Jim. This is generation 2, where you're using either a Tyvek or a black paper. You're protecting your sheathing, and you're using mechanical fasteners for mechanically attaching the EPS expanded polystyrene insulation up to the wood sheathing. So about one fastener per square foot. And so that also had drainage planes. So there were grooves in the back of the insulation to allow for vertical drainage. And so that was generation 2. And at that point, we really, as an industry, had stopped having the majority of our problems with Eifs. So right now, Eifs with a WRB, a weather-resistant barrier, and drainage capability is the standard in the United States. So today, the 3rd generation has all gone to liquid applied weather barriers, and Stow Corp was the leader and the initial company that came out with a product called Gold Coat, which was either roller applied or spray applied onto the sheathing. And that way, if you've got a paper, you had staples, you had laps, and that sort of thing. This is a monolithic product that you don't have to worry about windstorms tearing it off or it not being lapped properly, and that sort of thing. So it's either roller applied or spray applied in a fairly thin mill. It meets code at 10 wet mils, which is a pretty thin product. Most architects opt for like two coats, which is required over wood sheathing. So here you can see some of it being installed around window openings. One of the big things, you guys are usually coming in checking houses after they've been built or been built for some time, but one of the biggest things I see is new builders, they'll put their windows in before the weather barrier is wrapped into the window opening. I know they want to get to the drywall and everything, but it's very important that the liquid applied products be completely done in the window openings before the windows go in. So go ahead, Jim. Some of those are active details. Keep
okay. There you go.
So what we call StoGuard is a family of products at Stow for waterproofing. So we have, if an architect wants to use one of our peel and stick membranes at the window openings and then use our liquid applied to lap into that, we have that. If you have any moving joints, you may use our peel and stick. Other than that, the majority of the projects are just using our gold coat and fabric. And our fabric is a roll of, it almost looks like dryer fabric. Honestly, here it is. That's the black material there. You actually take a 4-inch roller and you roll it onto the sheathing joint. Here it's plywood. And then you put this is not a peel and stick, so there's no stickiness to this fabric. It gets embedded into the wet gold coat, and then you roll on top of it again. And then you can do that for any of the joints, corners of the windows, but the entire house would get treated at all the openings and all the sheathing joints. And then the field, you get another coat over that. So then those areas would get coated again when the field gets coated. So you end up with a monolithic type situation. We also have some heavier gun grade products, which have become more popular because they're so quick. You don't have to use any fabric. You basically just gun it in a zigzag motion and use it like a Bondo knife and just pull it down. You could do that, your sheathing joints, your window openings, and then again, you come back with a gold coat for the entire building. So here it is. You're doing the entire wall at the end with the gold coat. So on large commercial jobs, a lot of the guys will spray. Residentially, you'd normally just see 2 coats with a roller. So, a lot of things in politics in our country through the years are talk about how much energy our cars use, and how much emissions our cars use. Well, it's really our buildings and our building stock, and we have a lot of old buildings, especially in New England, that just use a tremendous amount of emissions. A lot of it is we're losing heating and cooling because of air leakage. So these liquid applied weather barriers, compared to first generation where we had nothing, second generation where we had paper goods, which still leaked quite a bit. This one is really the spec is to be pinhole free. So that gold coat is supposed to go up pinhole free, and you're really saving a huge amount of air leakage. And then in turn, you're saving a lot of heating and cooling costs. So here's kind of a comparison. If you can see that picture, is you have a completed commercial building with gold coat. Everything's done. Down below is the second generation way where you're using, I shouldn't probably be saying Tyvek is a brand name. I'm not trying to pick on those guys because there's hundreds of Typar and all the builders have a brand. So I'm not trying to pick on them, but here is a project after a windstorm. And there's no way that that is going to be properly treated and taken care of from a waterproofing standpoint before that whatever exterior cladding goes on. So really, it's about a continuous waterproof system. So most all of our products in Eifs are 40 degrees and rising. So if you ever see the material applied, they should be applying it at 40 degrees or the temperature going up. It shouldn't be, 3 or 4 o'clock in the fall at the end of the day when temperatures are going down. Going to the next slide, Jim, our gold coat can go down to 25 degrees with a 6-month exposure rating. So a lot of builders want to know that if they put that gold coat up, they actually have 6 months of UV exposure before they have to put that exterior on. So as I said, we were first to enter, and so a gold coat can be put behind. So you can completely waterproof those buildings, just like we saw, even if it's brick or lap siding or metal panel. So it doesn't have to be behind an Eifs cladding. One of the things that has made Eifs so popular, especially now with continuous insulation, Massachusetts just re-upped some pretty substantial building code requirements for exterior insulation, is because Eifs stops thermal bridging. So if you have a normal house with siding and no exterior insulation, then you've got that thermal bridging where the studs are allowing the heat from the inside of the house in the wintertime to work its way through the studs and through the outside. Eifs really stops that thermal bridging so that you don't lose any of that heating costs. So that was a picture of a house with Eifs, is you don't have that thermal bridging and that heating loss. So another thing that is important that comes up is Eifs NFPA 285, which is the biggest fire test, and the answer is yes. And what Eifs is made out of, and we'll get into some of the insulations in a minute, but the majority of Eifs is with EPS, the white insulation, which looks like styrofoam. It's a denser product than like a styrofoam cup. There's different densities of EPS, but essentially it's expanded polystyrene and it's flammable. But what makes Eifs allowable to be tested and approved for NFPA 285 is the insulation is completely encapsulated in base coat, mesh, and finish. So even at the corners of windows or doors, or right up against the soffit or at termination, that system needs to be completely what's called back wrapped, where the mesh and the base coat go onto the back of the foam so that you don't have any exposed insulation that could be a fire issue. So here's generation 3. If you kind of click, I think you have to click through this, Jim, so there's your gold coat. Those ribbons of adhesive is the contractor actually uses a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch notch trowel vertically. So when they put up that insulation board, they actually butter the back of the insulation board vertically with a 1/2 inch notch trowel. So you get those vertical lines of adhesive, and they're about a 1/2 inch thick. And then when the contractor presses that 2 foot by 4 foot insulation board up into the wall, it leaves you with a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. It might be somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. It's not 3/8 of an inch. So that, let's say down the road, a builder didn't install a kick-out flashing or a window head flashing. Maybe the sealants failed. That water can get into the system, hit the gold coat, track down the vertical ribbons of adhesive, and get out either at a window head flashing or at the termination of the wall system, at the flashing at the bottom of the wall. So here's kind of a view of the insulation board with those vertical ribbons of adhesive. We also have a polyurethane adhesive called Turbo Stick, which is popular because it sets up really quick and the contractor can start working on the base coat and finish. But the standard on the left is the standard half-inch trowel, and then the Turbo Stick polyurethane adhesive. But that shows that if water gets in, you see you've got about between an eighth and a quarter of an inch of air cavity between those vertical ribbons of adhesive for drainage. So in the industry, we call it the three Ds. You deflect, drain, and dry. So most of the protection is really from your acrylic finish. And I laugh because if you get up and you touch the exterior and you scratch on it, you can take a piece off and it's integral color. So the color behind it is the same color, and you scratch it and there's more color. So that, when I say acrylics, they're so strong. They're like, a woman's acrylic nails, for instance, and you know how hard that sets up. So they're very good at deflecting weather. And again, if water gets in, it can drain and it can dry.
Your viewing code, if you're watching this as a pre-recorded event, is EFIS 2025.
And if anybody has any questions, please interrupt me. I'd be happy to answer questions as we go along. So the next thing, honestly, within the last 5 years, which has been really popular, is additional types of insulation with these systems. So we now have Stotherm CI with a standard EPS, which is expanded polystyrene. We also have it with the XPS, which is the extruded polystyrene. You can see the pink and the blue. The pink is Owens Corning and the blue is Dow Corning. They're the two manufacturers of XPS. And lastly, we have a system with mineral wool, which is completely fireproof. And you don't see that a lot. It's definitely more expensive than the other insulations, but just kind of shows you that, just because you see an exterior wall, you may need to follow up and find out exactly what type of system that may have been installed. The cost of XPS has about tripled in the last couple of years. You can buy boards in Lowe's or Home Depot, very expensive. And so Stowe has actually brought a product called GPS over from Europe. We've had it a couple of years. It's called graphite infused EPS. So it's the white EPS board infused with graphite. So it's actually a gray board, and it has the same R5 per inch that XPS has. So that's a big thing. So, if you're working with a builder and they need to meet a Massachusetts building code, they're doing some wall cavity insulation or spray insulation, they may want to look at different avenues of thickness. So the standard white EPS has an R of 3.8 per inch. And then the XPS has an R5 per inch. The mineral has an R4 per inch. The new GPS, which I don't have shown here, has an R5 per inch. And it's much cheaper than the XPS. So a lot of the jobs that originally were looking at going to XPS are now going with the gray GPS board for the extra R value. And then you don't have to build it out quite so thick. Go ahead, Jim. So getting into some design requirements, these are things that the architect is probably going to design when they're working with that project, if it's commercial or the builder should be as well. Wind loads are not really an issue for you guys with residential so much, but it does come into play. We actually do high-rise projects in New York City with Eifs. Next is we have different levels of meshes. So on the outside of the insulation board, after it is installed with the channel adhesive design that I showed, is it gets a layer of base coat, and then a mesh is embedded in the wet base coat and troweled smooth. And there's different levels of impact resistance. The standard mesh is a 4.5 ounce mesh, which goes on about 95% of projects because of cost. But we do have a 15 and 20 ounce mesh For lower high impact areas, I mean, you can think of if you walk into, a Target or a grocery store or Walmart or something where some shopping carts have hit the eaves. I think everybody's seen a broken piece of eaves with some mesh and base coat and maybe even some foam sticking out. Well, those low areas, if they didn't, the architect or builder should have specified a high impact mesh. And the high impact mesh is a 3-foot roll. So a lot of times the architect will do 6 feet in height. We would also recommend those for areas around balconies or decks and that sort of thing where you might want some extra impact. The next thing to look at is aesthetic V-grooves. Eaves has a V-groove, and it's really made there for aesthetics, but the acrylic finish, just like if you paint a wall in your house, you can't stop painting and go talk on the phone because you're going to have a wet cold joint there. You have a cold joint and you go back to paint and you're going to see the cold joint if you don't stop. You got to work corner to corner, right? So the V groove allows a break for the plasterer or plasterers, I should say, who are working across the wall, keeping the wet material, and then they can stop at a V groove or a break. So for aesthetics especially, it's really good to have some V grooves and some breaks. And then also, if an area is damaged, it's really easy to come back and repair an area from break to break rather than have to redo an entire wall on the elevation. The next one is something you can really look for. If you see cracks around windows, they probably did not L-cut the insulation. So the insulation board, just like sheathing, when sheathing is installed, they're supposed to L-cut that sheathing so you don't have a joint at the corner of the window where all the pressure is. It's the same with the insulation board, is that they should L-cut and then they put that L right in all 4 corners of the window so that the pressure doesn't have a crack. So if you see a crack right at the corner of a window, either going straight down or straight across, that's probably because they didn't, when they installed that insulation board, they didn't L-cut it. And, a crack isn't smart. A crack in hard coat stucco is just going to be kind of a crack that just goes off in whatever direction it wants to because of the pressure. A crack in eaves, if it's straight, it's following a board line in the insulation, and they probably didn't L-cut around the windows. Also, they may not have done a running bond pattern. Just like brick is installed half on top of half, that's what gives it its strength. The insulation board, as they do, they have to do a running bond pattern with each one of those insulation boards, because you don't want those board joints to line up. So if you see in the middle of the wall a big long line, that could be where they install the insulation boards without a running bond pattern. The next one is color. You guys don't really see color, but you may see fade, and certain colors fade because of the pigments, and dark colors fade. Greens fade, reds fade, blacks fade, and those black colors are super popular right now. So we always tell builders and architects is to stay with an LRV above 15%. So light reflective value is important. So a pure white has an LRV of 100. It's going to reflect 100% of that light. A dark black is going to have an LRV of 1 or 2. It's absorbing almost 100%. And those dark colors, they're absorbing so much light, they get hot and they fade. So, that's something, that you definitely could look at, because that has to do with whether the home may need to be repainted or not. Another thing is these systems are not designed to go below grade. I've got another detail. We're going to hit on that later, but they have to be kept above grade. And I've seen so many times where eaves is put on and then the landscaper comes in and then all of a sudden it's buried. It can't drain properly and dry out properly if it's below grade. So these systems are not to go below grade.
Mark,
is there any depth above grade that is recommended, or height above grade?
Yeah. For a residential home, we say 8 inches because we expect the landscaper to come in and maybe use four of that up. So if we end up with 4, we're happy, and it's going to drain and dry. For a commercial job, they can actually do 1 inch above a sidewalk, like at a, that sort of thing. But for residential, we do 8 inches. So another thing.
Quick question.
Yeah, sure.
In some of the houses that I've inspected here, not so much commercial, residential, it's like the original installation was good, but it was a lot of things that happened afterwards, or even so, like, I don't know if you have it in your presentation. Can you talk a little bit about when you like whether it's downspouts or somebody puts an outlet on the outside? What are
Yep, I do. I have an outlet connection detail coming up. Okay. I do. Yep.
Any penetration through that?
Yeah.
The guys do it right and the guys do it wrong.
Yeah. You're supposed to use a PVC sleeve and then screw through that. And you need to screw into either blocking or a stud or, something. There's got to be something other than, a 1/2 inch of sheathing or, that sort of thing. And then the sealant goes into that PVC, into that PVC tube to set up as you screw it into place. But I do have a detail coming up.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Yep. So the next thing you guys can look at is everything should be sloped. There should not be any flat areas for Eifs. So if you see what we call a belly band, where you have an aesthetic band, maybe between the first and second floor on a residence, and then you've got 1 inch or 2 inches of insulation. Every time you have that condition, you have to have a 1-2 slope, which is 27 degrees, because water and snow and freeze thaw cycles do not do well on flat surfaces with Eifs, because that acrylic will degrade over time and there just won't be anything there after a couple winters. So expansion joints, if there's any change in substrate, there's another thing. If you see cracking, if the building went from maybe they used block in an area of the building around the fireplace, or a lower elevation, but then they switched to wood sheathing. Anytime you have a change of substrate, there should be an expansion joint at that joint so that the Eifs doesn't crack. And then as far as sealant joints, and I've got some really good details later on, is we recommend a 1/2 inch sealant joints. For residential, we're okay with a 3/8. We just don't want to see a fillet bead. And a fillet bead is just when they, caulk it and just kind of go like that. You really need that backer rod so that you have two-sided adhesion. So the sealant is attached to the window and then the base coat on the Eifs, not the finish. And then it can perform very well through the years back and forth. But if it is attached in the middle of the joint, you have 3-sided adhesion, it doesn't have backer rod, and it's not going to be able to expand and contract. So sealants are a big issue with Eifs and maintaining them. Closed cell backer rod always too. So getting into some of the details, as I said, I can't say enough about sealant joints. For Eifs to perform well, you have to have backer rod and sealant around all the windows, all the doors, any dissimilar material. So if it butts up to brick, you might see that at the chimney, or if there's a wainscoting, any dissimilar materials need 1/2 inch joint with backer rod and sealant. An expansion joint, a change in substrate, that would be a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. And then the aesthetic in Eifs is just what I talked about, the V groove before, is they may put reveals. That is an aesthetic only joint with no caulking. So you guys know this more than anyone, is for you to get water in your building, there has to be a hole. And honestly, when I see problems, it's usually homeowners haven't maintained their sealants, or they don't even, you're supposed to inspect your sealants annually. They probably haven't been inspected. So when maybe somebody's buying a new home and you're doing an inspection, and a lot of times there's going to be holes in the sealants, and that's where water is entering the home. Here's dissimilar materials. This is something you guys probably see day to day. Either they did a fillet bead without a backer rod, so you can get true two-sided adhesion, or it's just an old sealant joint that needs to be removed and replaced. So we talked about movement with backer rod and sealant. We recommend a low modulus sealant, and if you get with Dow or you get with Sika or Owens Corning, they all make a low modulus sealant. That's exactly what we specify and recommend with Eifs. Use closed cell backer rod, and make sure, again, a lot of times the sealant may be attached. It needs to be attached to the base coat and not the finish, so that the contractor shouldn't be running the finish back into the return of the window, or at least where the sealant goes. They should be running the finish up to the face, and then the sealant should be adhered to the base coat and not the finish. So getting into some details, here's so a light fixture. You can see the blocking behind the sheathing. It's got to be attached to something solid, and again, those areas need, just like dissimilar materials, you would have half-inch for backer rod materials against any dissimilar material, and a pipe penetration and a light penetration would meet that criteria. Yeah, here's just some other details. Let's see. Here's an expansion joint. Yeah, if you're anticipating substrate movement. I talked about that with a change of substrate. Go ahead, Jim. In block, block is required to. You probably don't see this that much in residential, but block is required at so many linear feet to have an expansion joint. That would have to be continued through the Eifs system for backer rod and sealant. Here's one with residential that comes up a lot because builders do not want to see a floor line joint with a wood frame structure. And for a 2-story or a 3-story, you really need a floor line joint with Eifs. A lot of times they get away with it, and I don't see any cracking, and it works out fine. But other times it maybe have to do whether they're using engineered trusses or what actually their how good is their construction back there and what they're using for the wood framing. But really, for Type 5 wood frame construction, you should have a horizontal floor line for Eifs, and that should be a through wall with backer rod and sealant. If the architect, engineer, or builder, and here's an example with a commercial job, and there's a change and they're not anticipating any movement, then you can actually go continuous with the sheathing and continuous with the Eifs. It's up to the design professional or engineer, ultimately. Here's again dissimilar materials where the system meets up with brick. You would need a caulk joint. So here's the aesthetic reveals that I talked about, where it gives the applicator a place to work to so they don't get cold joints, but it also works towards a design element. For instance, limestone is really popular to kind of mimic a limestone look. The V groove is most popular, but with limestone you may have a box groove, which is perfectly acceptable too. But that is aesthetic reveal. It's completely non-functioning. It's aesthetic only. It doesn't perform anything, and you don't need any sealants. So another one you guys have to be looking at, and I know you do, is flashing installed. You go out to jobs and there's no window head flashing, or if there's a big sill, it probably needs sill flashing. Is there termination flashing at the bottom of the Eifs? All the flashing at the termination for Eifs should be with PVC. If you see hard coat stucco, everything with hard coat stucco are metal components. Everything with Eifs are PVC and plastic components. Another way to tell if you go to a job site, you just can knock on the wall. If you hurt your knuckles, it probably is hard coat stucco. If it sounds like a hollow log, it's an Eifs job. But yeah, termination flashing. We have a PVC. It's called starter track. They should have a proper flashing at termination. We just talked about floor lines. For commercial, you have to flash every third floor with Eifs. But with residential, you should probably have that flashing at that floor line. Roof line diverter flashings. This was the bane of all of those class action lawsuits that I talked about during Eifs' infancy when it was back in generation 1. Was honestly roof line diverter flashings were never installed, and water was going right back behind the system. Deck flashing is often missed. Parapet flashing, I always say Eifs is not a roofing material. I see people try to use it for that, and they should be using metal components for saddle flashing and parapet flashing. So here's that roof wall intersection. That has caused more problems with Eifs than any other single flashing out there. And here's an example of if you see that there's no flashing, no diverter flashing, and then there's problems there, and they end up tearing that section out and redoing it. You're going to find mold, mildew, rot, decay, depending on how long it's been. I mean, that has really been one of the biggest problems with Eifs. And one thing I'll say, and I'm in the industry, Eifs is one of the best claddings out there from an aesthetic standpoint, and you can add bands and details and cornices and coins, and the architect looks like $1 million. And you got your insulation value and your R value, and you're nice and warm in your house. But if it's installed incorrectly, Eifs is probably one of the worst systems you can have on your exterior. So it's really interesting that Eifs could be one of the worst claddings or one of the absolute best claddings out there. And it all depends on proper installation of the materials. So we talked about protection of roof openings before the windows are installed. We covered that. So here's parapet caps. Again, Eifs is not a roofing material. You need to make sure that those are covered properly with a metal parapet. Here's that termination of grade we talked about. So at the bottom there, you can see that white PVC starter track that I was referring to. The insulation board actually goes into that, so that the drainage plane goes into that, and then there's a bunch of holes in the bottom of that starter track for water to exit. And so it's oftentimes good, even if they terminate above grade, is to get down there and take a flashlight and look up there and just make sure that should be open. You should be able to see that water can actually get out. And bad contractors that don't use that PVC starter track will sometimes continue with not only the base coat and mesh, but the finish at that butt end of the system. And then they just gum it up with material. So if water got in the system, it can't get out. If for aesthetic reasons, I don't know why, because you actually can't see that PVC. You can see it's actually, the front of it's covered with base coat, mesh, and finish. But if for some reason that wasn't installed, we allow weep tubes, just like brick, about every 12 inches on center. So weep tubes could be installed if they wanted to caulk that area at termination. There are parts of the country that have a lot of insect issues. What's the insect that? What's the
Termites.
insect? Termites. Yeah, termite issues. So maybe you want to caulk that, but at least you caulk that butt end, but at least use weep tubes every 12 inches on center through your sealant joint. Here's another one where you're asking a lot of the Eifs. You've got a huge area up there, and then it's probably right off the highway, and all that dirt just sticks on there, and then when it rains, it comes down the face. So that would have performed much better if the architect had designed that with a metal flashing with a drip edge on the front.
Can that be power wash, painted? How do you clean that?
Yeah, that can be power washed. And at the end, Stowe has a new product that we came out with. It's really good with mold and mildew.
Right.
But yeah, at this point, TSP is a good cleaner for Eifs. Yeah, you can power wash that. You can use hot water and soap too with a soft bristle brush so you don't hurt the system, and kind of get that material loose and then pressure wash it. Eifs can also be painted, so we can match any color of the finish. And so those areas could also be recoated after they're cleaned. So same sort of thing, is just weather exposed edges. I don't know, that was something different. Here's one. If you click, there's some verbiage there, Jim. I guess that is. Here's one. Oh, here's one that I see so much, where you see a caulk joint where they do this great job installing the weather barrier, the liquid applied weather barrier, and they do or a peel and stick and a metal flashing down on the brick. Everything's good, and you've got the eaves up above, and the drainage is perfect, and then they caulk it. I've seen that so many times. I pointed out to my wife going into restaurants all the time, and then it annoys her. But
You're caulking it like right here?
Yeah, right here is that area needs to be kept open for drainage. And honestly, about half the time I see that caulked.
Yeah.
Like a bottom of a window, right?
Yeah. So you're at that point, you're just trapping water. If there is a leak, you're just trapping water. So again, we get into the slope. So a lot of bands, you've got to have that 1 to 27 degree slope. We do make a waterproof base coats, as do all the Eifs manufacturers. So there are areas where you could use our waterproof base coat at some of these sloped areas to help ensure the longevity in addition to the slope. I'm just throwing some pictures. Stowe has won EMA, which is the Eifs Industry Member Association. And if you go to the EMA website, they are a great third-party source of information. So if you're working with a homeowner on inspection and you don't want to use Stowe or Drive It, and you want it to be third-party, the Eifs Industry Member Association has a ton of information. They'll help you out. They'll help homeowners out. They've got details on their website, just like we do, but they give awards out every year. And this was a children's museum. We won that award 2 years ago for one of the best new projects for Eifs. So here's we're getting into what we talked about earlier, is anytime you have a sign detail or a flashing or anything, and you're penetrating, you have to have blocking or something to screw into. So many times you just see something that looks like it's failed, and that's because it's not even into framing, it's just into sheathing. And the builder needs to know, where his deck flashing is, or a light fixture. It needs to have some blocking in those areas before it's sheathed, so that you know exactly where that fixture is going to go, and you have something to screw into. So here's that sign detail we talked about. So if you look closely, there's a bolt assembly and there's a PVC sleeve there. So that PVC sleeve obviously needs to be the right size, so that bolt can go through the sleeve and bolt it in. And as they're bolting it in, that needs to be in the silicone or sealant is gunned into that PVC sleeve, so that bolt is completely encapsulated in sealant and goes into blocking.
I see it all the time. Obviously you do, and it's not necessarily the way it was. It's like people who go in afterwards. What is the reason if you just screw directly in and run a bead of caulk around it? Why is that not good?
Well, first of all, if there's no blocking, depending on the weight, I mean, I've seen some pretty big light fixtures that are heavy, especially on the real high-end homes. And so over time, you can have sag where that bolt or that penetration or screw that they used, just the OSB or plywood just isn't doing it. It's not into blocking, and you can see that it's sagging. And then another thing is whether they're actually doing a real sealant bead with back rod sealant or just a fillet bead of caulking, which just isn't going to last with three-sided adhesion.
So in other words, I'm just they're just screwing right into the Eifs, and then I mean, they're probably catching some wood and everything that the fixture is not falling off.
Yeah, no.
Why do you need that tube?
Yeah, during the installation of the Eifs, they should actually cut that back, because remember, for that NFPA 280 fire code, the raw edge of the Eifs has to be base coated and meshed to meet that fire code. So if they forget, oh shoot, I forgot to put where we're putting in this sign, and the Eifs guy's already gone on to the next job, the builder cuts that hole out. He's leaving a raw edge, and you can't really caulk to a raw edge of foam. That doesn't work. So that's another way for failure to happen.
Okay.
I don't know how many. This might be more of a commercial thing, but one thing I see a lot is there's a little bit of a joint about 1 inch off that soffit. That does a great job with wind-driven rain. If you just have a little V groove or a little joint, and you see it says a little gap there, is for wind-driven rain, the water will stop there and it'll be an automatic little drip edge. And if that soffit is just flat, and I see it a lot on the canopies if I'm staying in a hotel and the canopies don't have some sort of detail about 1 to 2 inches off the edge, you'll see just staining on the underside of those canopies. And it's the same with the soffit. Is with Eifs, the finish will stain, and you'll see where wind-driven rain has stained the finish, and it's kind of just a ugly issue at that point. We already talked about this, is you can upgrade your mesh for durability. Go ahead, Jim. So this is an AI Architects class. Can you press play on this, Jim?
Yeah, there we go.
We go. So this is, we gave this gal a hammer with high impact, the 20-ounce mesh that we recommend for lower levels or, areas of you expect high impact, maybe near your patio or grill or that sort of thing. And this high impact mesh actually meets the Miami-Dade code for missile impact for a hurricane. So Eifs can be very, if it's just that 4-ounce mesh, it can be very fragile, but it can be very durable too with high impact meshes. This one is more a little bit about aesthetics. If you go out to a job, these are all hand applied materials. And what's really popular now is the super smooth finishes. And smooth finishes do not hide any imperfections in a hand applied material. So I prefer a heavier textured finish because it really, at the end of the day, it looks better.
If you're watching this as a pre-recorded event, your viewing code is STO 2065.
So I'm kind of wrapping up here, and then we can go into Q&A. This is just an example of why Eifs became so popular. Is you can use foam for anything, and it's all computerized and cut now. So you could do any sort of window, these intricate on this beautiful custom home on the bottom left, those are all cut with foam. So you've got these beautiful details around windows and everything, and it looks very expensive, but it's just made out of foam. And then commercially, we can do the same with making an entryway, the one above it, looking like something that you'd see in Italy or in Rome. So Eifs can make an architect or a builder really look like a hero with the the design elements that you can do with insulation. This was this year's design winner in the Bronx, which was it's called the Atrium. I think it's a multi-use building, but again with Eifs is you can cut foam at any angle and really can make some really creative designs and with color and texture. Vibrant and intense colors like dark colors are very popular lately, and they do fade. We talked about that. So we can pretty much do anything with Eifs as far as design to make it look like concrete or make it look like wood. Keep going, Jim. So here's actually, we make Eifs brick with two different ways. We have a template system where the base coat is already put up, and we use a UV primer on the base coat to the color of the brick joint. And then a brick template goes up, and then red finish is installed. And in this case, the texture kind of goes vertically, and then the template gets pulled off before the finish dries, and voila, you've got brick. So I like to show that because you never know if you're going to a job and there's an Eifs house and there's a wainscoting of brick. You might want to check if it's real brick or not, because just in the last 5 years, it's a lot easier to have one contractor for Eifs rather than have another separate brick contractor. And then with some of the building codes requiring exterior insulation, there's Eifs out there that look like brick. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So yeah, here's an Eifs template brick going up. And look at this. This is actually, we had to do a mock-up to do Eifs brick next to a real brick building. And this was our mock-up next to a real brick. And the next picture, and the next slide will show. So the existing brick was that little building on the side, and then they added the emergency room, and they used Stowe cast brick on the rest of it, and it was an exact match. So somebody walking in that building would never know that that building was Eifs. We do a lot of limestone, and all that is either reveals or EPS insulation that was computerized cut to make that building look like that. Some different patinas. Yeah, different patina.
That was a lot of plaster back in the day, huh?
Yeah. Well, that was those guys that have real talent are retiring. So that's another reason for you guys to be vigilant, because sometimes the quality of the guys out there isn't what it used to be. And we also do wood. We have an acrylic board that gets glued onto the Eifs, and then you stain it just like real board. The nice thing about this is that after 3 years, it doesn't look terrible and cracked and faded. So this is really popular with the coffee houses and Starbucks on the entryways.
Is it pretty durable? Very durable?
It's very durable, and it just doesn't age like real wood. It's an acrylic board.
Nice.
Color and just showing color and texture. This is not real brick, so that's Eifs. That's a whole Eifs job. Yeah, that's oops.
Sorry.
It's a job where somebody actually scraped it, kind of like a sidewalk, or maybe used a broom finish to give it a unique look between the windows. Do you see that between those windows?
Very nice.
So it's very versatile. Here's our wood, and it's if you're not doing it on like a coffee shop, which seems to be popular, or a walk-in sandwich shop or something, it is popular as like just an entryway accent. But again, you don't have to hire a completely different contractor because your Eifs guy can do that. So yeah, this is concrete. So lastly, I'm going to end with kind of a new product. I only have a couple minutes left. Is Stowe invented Stowe Color Lotusin, and Sherwin-Williams has copied us, and a lot of other copied us. Is one of our scientists saw what the lotus leaf, and it's a biomimicry, just like Velcro. It's something that was learned out of nature. Is that on the lotus leaf, when water hits it, it doesn't wet into it. It just stays in a complete sphere, kind of like those old mercury thermometers, if you ever saw one as a kid. Unfortunately, I'm old enough to know that. But anyway, on the lotus leaf, the water balls up, and when it rolls off, it takes the dirt with it. So we're like, huh. Well, if you look under it, it's hundreds and thousands of beds of little points. So we're able to mimic that with an acrylic finish with all those little points when it dries back. And go on to the next one, Jim, is so we're able to do that with our product is called Lotus, and we have it in both a textured finish and in a paint. And when it rains, it actually takes the dirt with it. So it works great for light colored buildings, especially if they're maybe in a nice highway, or a nice neighborhood, but it's within a short distance from a highway or something. So it's getting a lot of that, that's air pollutant type stuff. But it really doesn't cost that much more than our regular finish. And in the scheme of things, it doesn't cost much on a whole house at all, really. So we're selling an awful lot of Lotusin for self-cleaning finishes.
Nice. Self-cleaning buildings.
Yeah. So here's one where this was Lotusin. So when it rained, it cleaned the building, and the old one just kept getting probably in the shade, I would imagine, somewhere down south, but it just kept doing that. And Atlanta, Stowe is out of Atlanta, so I'm sure this is a picture from the Atlanta area, but that just shows you how it helps keep your building clean.
Well, this was great. I'm going to open it up to any questions. If anybody has anything, we've got a couple minutes left. I guess not.
Mark, any local contractors in Connecticut that are that you
Yeah, we've got a couple really good residential guys that I can recommend. I can send their contact information to Jim.
Yeah, I'll put it on the website.
And lastly, probably one of the best sources is we have a booklet of residential details. There are Stowtherm CI system is our Eifs system. And so there's a detail booklet of Stowtherm CI wood framed, which is really just a residential detail booklet. And I'll also send that on to Jim so that if you have a question about one of those sign details or, a parapet or a kick out, all those are in there. And so I'll get that to Jim as well.
So there's always a solution to any of the problems that we see. Like I see some roofers when they're ripping off shingles, damage it. This all can be repaired.
Yep, we have a repair detail booklet as well on the website. So if something gets dinged up or has to be repaired, that booklet must be 60 pages of pretty much any different type of repair with each detail you can imagine. So I can send Jim, it's a pretty big booklet, so I can send Jim the link.
Now, Mark, there's a problem too. Now, if it's an older home, the color won't always match. So there has to be some painting involved, correct?
Yeah. The best thing with older homes is really to pressure wash it and paint it. And we make that Lotus in a paint. So that's really what we're doing with a lot of recoats is they really don't cost that much more, than regular paint. And I mean, if the materials cost 10% more, all the cost really is in the labor for these jobs, right? So it really doesn't move the needle very much. So yeah, we would recommend a recoat. Or if you have one elevation that's bad, is you could actually paint from corner to corner. So you could paint one elevation if you had to, or the whole building.
Well, this was very informative, Mark. I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. This was just extremely knowledgeable. I think we got a lot out of it. We know, what to look for. Again, I just want to thank you for your time.
No, I'm happy to, Jim. And I'll also give you my email address and phone numbers. I have Connecticut as a customer. My Stowe distributor is in Berlin, Connecticut.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm available. So if I'll give Jim the info. And if you guys want to, if you're on a house 6 months from now, you can go back with Jim and get my info and call me, and I'll certainly help you out with whatever you're dealing with.
And tell Dan thank you very much
Oh, I sure will.
as well.